An 80-year-old man stands in a vast, colonnaded hall in Memphis, holding a piece of dead wood, designed to terrorize a stubborn pharaoh into letting a captive labor force walk out into the desert. And they certainly carry a weight of terror. He was supposed to maintain the Ma'at, the perfect balance of the universe. But the boy is dead. The dynasty is broken. The illusion is permanently over. The blood on the Hebrew doorframes is not a superstition. It is a receipt. It declares to the spiritual realm that a life has already been paid for. It proves that death has already visited this specific house and has no legal right to enter again. The God of the Hebrews has completely shattered the pantheon. He has crushed the agricultural economy. He has humiliated the king. And now, he has broken the chains. Before the sun even rises, Pharaoh summons Moses and Aaron. He does not negotiate. He does not set new conditions. He begs them to take their people and leave. A nation of slaves walks out of the heavy gates of Egypt. They carry gold. They carry silver. They carry the bones of Joseph. They march into the desert, free for the first time in 400 years. But freedom is a dangerous, fragile thing, because the road out of Egypt does not lead directly to a promised land. It leads to a geographical trap. You know the exact feeling. You pray for years for the chains to break, asking God to get you out of the toxic environment. But if you look closer at the specific domains being attacked, at the exact sequence of the chaos, you start to see something: the crushing financial weight, or the habit that has acted as your taskmaster. And then, miraculously, the heavy iron door swings open. You walk out into the sunlight, assuming the hardest part of the journey is finally behind you. You expect an open road, but if you are in a season where the initial high of your deliverance has suddenly crashed into a wall of impossible circumstances, you need to pay very close attention to the specific map of the Exodus. Because the route out of Egypt does not make any geographical or tactical sense. There is a well-traveled, highly efficient coastal route called the Way of the Philistines that would take a massive crowd straight into the land of Canaan in a matter of weeks. It is the logical path. It is the safe path. But the text explicitly notes that God refuses to take them that way. He deliberately directs this massive, vulnerable column of refugees to turn back and camp at a place called Pi-Hahiroth, which translates to the mouth of the gorges. Picture exactly where you would be standing if you were in their sandals. You are funneled into a narrow coastal plain. To your left and your right are steep, jagged mountain ridges of red rock that are completely impossible to climb with livestock and children. Straight ahead of you is the vast, dark, uncrossable expanse of the Red Sea, the wind whipping the cold, salty spray into your face. The magic trick reading completely misses. The plagues are not random acts of divine temper. They are a surgical deconstruction. The dead end is not a navigational error. It is a necessary theater for a final, permanent severance. And then, the ground begins to vibrate. You can hear the rhythmic, terrifying thunder of 600 chosen Egyptian chariots in the distance. You can see their bronze wheels kicking up massive columns of dust on the horizon, catching the dying light of the sun. Pharaoh has recovered from his grief. He has realized he just let his entire economic engine walk out the door. And he is coming with his military elite to slaughter you or drag you back in chains. You are completely, utterly trapped. This is the exact moment where human faith is tested the most severely. It is not in the slavery of Egypt. It is in the terrifying vulnerability of the dead end. When you realize that the God who freed you has seemingly walked you straight into a trap that you cannot fight your way out of. The Israelites panic. They scream at Moses, their voices raw with terror, asking if there were not enough graves in Egypt that he had to bring them out here to die in the dirt. But Moses does not flinch. He knows something about the God who commands the water. And the specific Hebrew action that happens next is going to echo all the way back to the very first chapter of the universe. To feel the weight of this story, you have to step into the mind of a Bronze Age Egyptian. Moses steps to the edge of the foaming black water. The wind howls. The Egyptian war chariots thunder behind him, the ground shaking under their bronze-rimmed wheels. The people scream. God speaks from the pillar of fire. He does not tell Moses to pray. He tells him to lift the dead piece of wood, lift up your staff, and stretch out your hand over the sea, and divide it. Exodus chapter 14, verse 16. It sounds like a simple geographical instruction, a gentle parting, a polite opening of a door. But the word the English translation uses for divide here is the Hebrew verb baka. It appears over 50 times in the Old Testament, and it never means a calm, orderly separation. It means to cleave. It means to rip apart with immense, catastrophic force. If you are a woodcutter bringing a heavy iron axe down to violently split a log of wood, that impact is baka. If you are an invading army breaching the thick stone walls of a fortified city, that shattering is baka. And most significantly, it is the exact same word used in Genesis chapter 7. Verse 11. On the day the great flood begins, the text says, all the fountains of the great deep burst open. They baka. That single ancient verb changes everything about what is happening on the shoreline. Their world is not governed by chance. It is held together by an invisible cosmic architecture called Ma'at, a perfect, delicate balance of order. This is not a gentle parting of the waters. It is a violent tearing of creation. In the ancient Near East, the sea is the ultimate symbol of chaos. It is the dark, untamed abyss. It represents the primeval forces of death and anti-creation. And God is not just politely moving some water out of the way so a crowd of refugees can take a walk. He is acting as a cosmic warrior. He is ripping the throat of the chaos monster completely open. The east wind hits the water like a physical fist. The sea tears in half. A dry, sandy path appears in the middle of the raging abyss. Walls of dark, churning water stand up on the left and on the right, defying gravity, held back by an invisible, terrifying pressure. The salty spray whips across the faces of the Israelites. The way is open. The trap is broken. But walking into a torn ocean requires a very specific kind of surrender. An old man steps onto the damp, exposed sand of the seabed. The towering walls of black, churning water loom on either side of him, vibrating with an immense, terrifying pressure. The salt burns in his lungs as he breathes the cold night air. The Israelites do not walk into. The river floods on time. The sun rises on time. The earth produces grain. A massive pantheon of gods exists solely, a peaceful, sunny miracle. They walk into a terrifying, unnatural canyon of suspended water, illuminated only by the massive, blinding pillar of fire standing between their vulnerable camp and the raging Egyptian army. To take that first step requires an agonizing suppression of every human instinct for survival. You are walking into the throat of the chaos monster, trusting that the God who ripped it open has the strength to hold its jaws apart until your children reach the other side. The wet mud grips at the leather sandals of the escaping slaves as they move through the gorge. The roar of the held-back ocean deafens their ears. A constant, thundering reminder of the fragile grace keeping them alive. Then, the pillar of fire lifts from the rear guard. The darkness rushes in. The Egyptian chariots charge onto the exposed seabed, their war horses foaming at the mouth. The soldiers gripping their bronze spears, desperate to reclaim their lost property. Pharaoh's elite military force is blinded by its own arrogance. They look at the torn sea and do not see the terrifying, sovereign power of a cosmic king. They only see an open road, an opportunity to slaughter a trapped flock of sheep. But they are not chasing slaves anymore. They are charging directly into a divine ambush. The heavy, bronze-rimmed chariot wheels sink deeply into the saturated mud, violently snapping axles and sending armored soldiers crashing into the dark, suffocating sludge to keep the darkness and chaos at bay. And Pharaoh is not just a political ruler. He is the living, breathing pin. Panic finally sets in. But it is too late. Moses stands safely on the opposite eastern shore in the freezing dawn air. He stretches out his hand, holding the same battered wooden staff. One last time. The eastern wind stops. The invisible pressure, holding back the abyss, suddenly vanishes. The sea does not gently flow back together. It collapses. Billions of tons of dark, crushing water fall simultaneously from the sky, burying the military pride of the greatest empire on earth in a violent, chaotic silence. Bodies, shields, and splintered wood wash up on the shoreline as the sun breaks over the horizon. The crossing is not a geographical shortcut. It is the baptism of a nation. The water washes away the taskmasters, the whips, and 400 years of invisible chains. When the morning sun finally rises over the Red Sea, the Israelites look back and realize there are no masters left to fear. But a deliverance this absolute always demands a response, and the one that echoes across the shore that morning changes the way we understand every miracle that just happened. A wooden staff struck the Nile, and the lifeblood of an empire turned to a rotting corpse. A swarm of flies filled the air, and a border was drawn that chaos could not cross, that holds that entire cosmic system together. His primary job is to maintain the balance. When Moses walks into that throne room, a plague of darkness buried the land, and the supreme sun god was suffocated in his own sky. A branch smeared blood on a wooden frame, and an untouchable dynasty was permanently broken. A trapped column of refugees hit a dead end, and a trap became the theater for a final severance. An old man lifted a piece of dead wood, and the throat of the chaos monster was ripped violently open. A battered people stepped into the dark abyss, and the waters of death became the waters of their birth. Same staff, same God, but maybe the part that stays with me most is the dead end. The moment they are standing at Pi Hahiroth, staring at a dark, uncrossable sea, listening to the chariots of their old taskmasters thundering in the distance. The route out of Egypt was not a geographical mistake. It was a deliberate routing by a god, who knew that the only way to kill their fear of the empire forever was to bury it right in front of their eyes. If you are in a season where the initial high of your deliverance has suddenly crashed into a wall of impossible circumstances, you do not have to panic. He is not negotiating a labor dispute. He is declaring that the entire Egyptian reality is a fragile illusion. The dead end is not a navigational error. It is a necessary formation. God does not lead his people into a corner to let them be slaughtered by the things they used to serve. He leads them to the edge of the water so they can finally see what happens when the chaos monster is ripped open. And may the God who has never once wasted a dead end stand as a pillar of fire between you and the things chasing you, and bring you out the other side, carrying a freedom you could not have received any other way. If this opened something inside you, subscribe. Leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with someone who feels trapped between their past and an uncrossable sea. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. The weapon he brings to this cosmic war is not a chariot. It is not an army. It is a shepherd's walking stick. The air is thick with the smell of burning myrrh and the heavy heat of the North African sun baking the stone outside, stained with the sweat of a man who thought his life was over. The magicians of Egypt throw down their staffs. 2. Their wood becomes snakes. The marble room is suddenly filled with the sound of hissing venom, but Moses' snake swallows theirs whole. It is a quiet, terrifying preview of everything that is about to happen. Every time that wooden staff hits the earth or points to the sky, it will target a specific deity in a specific domain, exposing their absolute impotence. God is taking the Egyptian universe apart, piece by piece. But to understand how this unraveling actually works, you have to look at the specific language the Hebrew text uses to describe these events. Because the word we casually translate as plague is hiding something violent. When you read the English translation of Exodus, chapters 7 through 11, the text repeatedly uses a single, familiar word to describe the horrors that fall upon the empire: plagues. The English word carries a very specific mental image. It makes us think of a virus. It makes us picture a sickness drifting on the wind. a biological contagion spreading randomly from house to house, an ecological disaster that just happens to spiral out of control. But the word the Hebrew text actually uses is the noun makkah. He is surrounded by priests, draped in leopard skins, and royal guards gripping bronze spears. He is not a general. Its root is the violent, percussive verb naka. It does not mean a disease. It does not mean an illness. It means to strike, to beat, to deliver a heavy and devastating physical blow. If you were an ancient blacksmith bringing a heavy iron hammer down onto a glowing anvil, that impact is naka. If you were a soldier driving a bronze sword through the armor of an enemy, that thrust is naka. In fact, it is the exact same root word used just a few chapters earlier in Exodus 2, when Moses struck and killed the Egyptian taskmaster, who was beating a Hebrew slave. That vocabulary changes everything about what is happening in the narrative. These events are not ecological anomalies. They are calculated, targeted, kinetic strikes. To an ancient reader, this is not a story about climate disasters. This is hand-to-hand combat in the heavenly realms, because Egypt did not just view the natural world as a physical environment, they viewed it as a divine tapestry. They worshipped over 80 major deities, each assigned to manage a very specific piece of the material world. The Nile was not just a body of water, it was the literal bloodstream of the god Hapi, the spirit of the flood who brought thick, black, life-giving silt to the desert banks. The frogs that lived in the reeds were not just amphibians. They were the protected, sacred symbol of Heket, the goddess of fertility and childbirth. He is not a politician. He is a shepherd who has spent the last 4 decades smelling like sheep, hiding in a dry wasteland, depicted in temple carvings with a human body and a frog's head. The sun that baked the limestone pyramids was not simply a star. It was Ra, the supreme creator, traveling across the sky in a golden boat. When we read the list of 10 events, we see a bizarre sequence of ancient annoyances. We see bugs, weather anomalies, and darkness. But the original audience saw a systematic dismantling of a theological superpower. Every time Moses raises the wood of his staff, he is not just bringing discomfort. He is executing a precise assassination of an Egyptian deity's jurisdiction, exposing them as powerless frauds who cannot even control the elements they supposedly created. God is not simply trying to force an exit. He is permanently shattering the illusion that the Egyptian gods exist at all. The first 3 strikes set the pattern, but they also turn the most sacred substance in the empire into something that produces only death. Moses stands on the bank of the Nile in the cool morning air. He waits in the reeds for Pharaoh. The king of Egypt comes to the water not just to bathe, but to perform the daily religious rites to Hapi, the god of the flood. Pharaoh steps toward the sacred water. The wooden staff raises. It strikes the surface. The river stops moving. The clear water turns thick, trying to forget that he was once a prince in this very building. He throws the wooden staff onto the polished limestone floor. The silverfish suffocate and float to the surface, their white bellies shining in the sun. A heavy, metallic stench of blood rises into the reeds. The Egyptians dig frantically in the dry dirt along the banks, their fingernails caked in mud, desperately looking for a drop of water that isn't contaminated. The lifeblood of the empire is a rotting corpse. This is not an ecological crisis. It is an execution. 7 days pass. The staff stretches out again. The river opens, and the frogs pour out. They do not stay by the banks. They swarm the polished limestone steps of the palace. They crawl into the dark, warm spaces of the clay baking ovens. They slip between the linen bedsheets of the royal chambers. You cannot walk without feeling the sickening crunch of them under your sandals. The goddess Heket, the protector of fertility, is weaponized against the very homes she was supposed to bless. Then, the staff hits the earth. Aaron strikes the dust of the ground. The dirt itself rises into the air. It becomes a buzzing, biting swarm of gnats. The dust settles on the skin of the priests. It burrows into the fur of the livestock. It clouds the eyes of the royal guard. The earth god Geb cannot control his own soil. The water turns to blood. The river vomits frogs. The dust becomes insects. 3 strikes. 3 gods exposed. It hits the stone with a sharp crack. Then, the wood softens. The surface ripples into scales. The dead thing breathes, coils, and hisses. The Egyptian magicians stand in the palace, watching the dust bite their own skin. They had used their dark arts to replicate the blood, only making the water crisis worse. They had used their spells to summon more frogs, adding to the infestation. But here, at the 3rd strike, their magic hits a hard, immovable wall. They look at the swarming dust. They look at Pharaoh, and they confess a terrifying truth. This is the finger of God. The rapid strikes are working. The pantheon is bleeding. But up to this point, the chaos is universal. The blood, the frogs, and the gnats fell on the entire land of Egypt. The Hebrew slave felt the bite of the gnat just like the Egyptian taskmaster. The Israelites endured the stench of the dead river, right alongside their captors. But as the 4th blow prepares to fall, the battlefield shifts. God is about to draw a physical line in the sand. In any ancient conflict, the most terrifying weapon an army can deploy is precision, up until the 4th strike. The chaos is indiscriminate. The Egyptian and the Hebrew suffer under the exact same ruined sky. But then the text introduces a profound shift in the cosmic architecture, noting that when the swarms of flies arrive, they do not cross into the region of Goshen, where the Hebrew slaves live. This is the moment the war begins. But it is a war that most people completely misunderstand. You have probably seen the cinematic adaptations. God draws a border that insects, weather, and disease cannot cross. The separation in Goshen is not geographical favoritism. It is a theological indictment. It proves to the watching world that these events are not simply natural disasters spinning out of control. An ecological collapse does not politely stop at a county line. A viral outbreak does not check the ethnicity of its victims before infecting them. By creating a perfectly preserved safe zone in the middle of a collapsing empire, the God of the Hebrews is demonstrating absolute, granular control over the very elements. The Egyptian gods are failing to manage. The strikes become heavier, and the domain expands from the water and dirt into the atmosphere, and the physical bodies of the Egyptians themselves. A devastating disease sweeps through the Egyptian livestock, striking the sacred bulls of Apis and the cow goddess Hathor. Festering, painful boils erupt on human skin, mocking the healing goddess Sekhmet, who cannot even cure the priests, serving in her own temples. Heavy, localized hail shatters the fragile flax stalks and crushes the barley fields, proving the sky goddess, Nut, is utterly helpless against the storm. Swarms of locusts descend, stripping every remaining green leaf, starving the agricultural deities into total submission. If something about reading the Exodus story as a cosmic war instead of a random fairy tale is shifting how you see the text, the dramatic, swelling music, the Charlton Heston booming voice, the CGI plagues dropping from the sky in a chaotic montage of special effects. You're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the sky above Egypt goes completely black. The 9th strike is the ultimate humiliation of the ancient world. For 3 days, it a darkness so thick and heavy that the text says it can be physically felt settles over the empire. You cannot see the person sitting next to you. You cannot light a torch. The supreme creator god of the Egyptian pantheon, the sun god Ra, is essentially blotted out, buried alive in his own sky, while the Hebrews in Goshen continue to have light in their dwellings. Every major deity has been systematically stripped of their power. The river, the earth, the sky, the sun, all conquered, all exposed as frauds. But Pharaoh's heart remains a stone, and there is one final, terrible domain left to strike, a hyssop branch dips into a bronze basin. Thick, red blood drips onto the dirt. A father reaches up in the dark. He smears the wet, metallic-smelling liquid across the wooden lintel of his front door. He marks the left post. He marks the right post. The dry wood absorbs the stain. He steps inside. He pulls the door shut. He waits in the dark. Most people assume the miracles of Moses were just a random assortment of divine magic tricks, a heavenly flexing of muscles. Inside the small stone house, the air smells heavily of roasted lamb, fire smoke, and bitter herbs. Families stand tightly around the table. They do not sit. They wear their leather sandals. Their cloaks are already tucked tightly into their belts. Their wooden walking sticks are gripped tightly in their hands. They eat fast. They do not speak. They just listen to the suffocating silence outside. Midnight arrives. A shadow moves through the winding streets of Egypt. It does not carry a physical sword. It does not march with a physical army. But it brings a devastation that no Egyptian magic can stop. No priest can ward off. And no temple can hide from. A sudden, piercing cry rises in the distance. It shatters the quiet night. It starts in a mud brick house by the river. It spreads to the neighboring street. It rolls across the city like a shockwave. It echoes through the towering, limestone corridors of the royal palace. Pharaoh wakes up in the dark. He walks frantically to his heir's bed. He finds the boy cold and still. The 10th and final strike falls. It targets the ultimate Egyptian deity. Pharaoh himself was worshipped as the living, breathing incarnation of Horus, the divine son of Ra. His firstborn son was the guaranteed heir to the cosmic throne. The boy was supposed to be untouchable,